The free concert at Altamont in 1969 was going to be California's answer to Woodstock. But what a difference. Excerpts from a story by Pat Craig, Contra Costa Times, December 1994. The white 59 Chevy groaned onto 11th Street from the driveway of Walt's home by the Grinder Drive-In in downtown Tracy. The beans and meat had festered in the special sauce for nearly a week, making the concoction nearly black and seriously challenging to even the toughest digestive system. We'd eaten several bowls and were sweating contentedly by the time the Chevy pulled into the parking lot of the Centramart at the west end of town. The stop was brief, only long enough to select a bottle of wine. Our choice was Red Mountain, which came in gallon bottles. It didn't cost much more than a gallon of gasoline, and probably didn't taste much better. Violating Department of Motor Vehicles laws, but obeying the laws of a youth culture that had already convinced us that wearing beads was cool. We unscrewed the cap and gulped down a couple of healthy swigs. The Chevy, with Coney Island of the Mind painted on either side, was pointed west, heading up into the Altamont Pass. The Rolling Stones were supposed to play at the racetrack the next day. The Stones wanted to play free concert to thank the youth of America for making them rich. First, it was going to be in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. When that fell through, it was supposed to be at Sears Point Raceway over in Sonoma County. And when that didn't work out either, Altamont Speedway owner Dick Carter decided to earn a piece of rock history for his racetrack, nestled in the dry, grassy, god-awful isolated hills between Tracy and Livermore. If you were going to pick the setting for a rural hell, Altamont would be the place. But it didn't seem like that at dusk on Friday, when the 59 glided off the freeway and turned onto the country road that led to the track. Eventually, we found ourselves in a counterculture traffic jam, crawling along behind VW buses with American flag window curtains and flowers and peace signs decorating every square inch of metal. There were also mom's station wagons and fading sedans amidst the hippie buses, brightly painted and turned into mobile crash pads, psychedelic delivery vans and VW bugs that spewed blue-white oil smoke. In December of 1969, getting there was more important than saving the environment. It was dark when we bumped onto the field that had been turned into a parking lot and campground. The most enterprising had already started pulling wooden slats from the cyclone fences and plucking up fence posts for firewood. By about 8 p.m., the little hippie valley was punctuated with campfires, as music, live and recorded, wafted across the acreage on clouds of marijuana smoke. For a couple of hours, life was just about perfect. The idyllic future that had been predicted during the summer of love several years earlier had arrived. We were together, singing, dancing, and celebrating life in this Aquarian paradise that had been a wind-ravaged draw just hours before. The revolution is over, some guy croaked, trying his best to keep the marijuana smoke compressed in his lungs, and we won, man, we won. That would be the Second American Revolution, the flower power anti-war peace to all movement. Of course, people were still dying in Vietnam, and things weren't exactly swell in the cities. But right there on that night, we stood in the shadow of Woodstock and smiled at the future. Just over a slight rise, workmen sped to bolt together the metal pipes that would make up the stage and light standards for tomorrow's concert. Those camping out muttered things about this being our Woodstock, figuring we'd easily top the East Coast's 3 days of peace and love. Past midnight, as numerous skirmishes in the sexual revolution were raging beneath the stars in the parking lot, a black limousine slipped silently across the grounds and stopped in front of the stage. A man in a long black coat and newsboy hat slid out of the back seat and began silently wandering around the stage area. Mick Jagger spoke to no one, only smiling and nodding if someone greeted him, then apparently satisfied with what he saw, the singer quietly left. People began drifting toward the stage in the early hours on Saturday, setting up camp at the foot of where the Stones, Crosby, Stills and Nash, the Jefferson Airplane, Santana and others would perform in just a few hours. Morning came quickly, and most of us were hungry. We'd imagined snack stands with sizzling burgers and deep-fried burritos. But there was nothing other than the food that spilled from the hippie buses and was shared in the true spirit of Woodstock. Drugs, on the other hand, were abundant. And then, as if someone opened a gate, the crowds started coming in from the parking areas. It was like the Oklahoma land rush in tie-dye and granny glasses. Thousands of people, maybe 250,000 or 500,000, crowded toward the stage. The official estimate was 300,000. The LSD began revealing itself in a number of ways. A guy got naked and wandered the ground like a low-flying Goodyear blimp. A couple embraced and created their own private universe in the midst of the crowd. A young man fell to the ground, foaming at the mouth and dancing out some horrible personal agony. Doctors picked him up and dragged him backstage. The first customer at the bummer tent. Another man, believing most of us were bent on killing the small dog he had with him, pulled a knife and swung it at anyone within 5 feet of him. That was a precursor of the rest of the day. What had been paradise turned into something out of The Road Warrior. We were in a desolate, food-free, restroom-free, shelter-free world that was soon to be visited by the Hells Angels. The Angels had allegedly been hired by the Stones to provide security. Legend has it they were paid in beer, and they were in a fairly grumpy mood, frequently swinging sawed-off pool cues at those in the audience who had done something to offend. By the time the first act, Santana, began performing, we had become wedged between the crowd and the stage. On one side, the crowd was pressing us into the front of the stage like a prom corsage in a dictionary. On the other, the Hells Angels were swinging pool cues at us and telling us to move back. Finally, my friends and I were grabbed from above by denim and leather-clad angels and tossed across the stage and off the back. Watching from the back, you could occasionally see an angel dive into the crowd and swing his cue like a baseball bat. Away from the crowd, in an office high above the speedway, Dick Carter sat with family and friends, talking to reporters from around the world about how this was just the start and how Altamont would become a rock music mecca. Years later, Carter said he still felt he might have had a bright future in the rock world if things had worked out differently. But things didn't work out that way. The Angels continued their periodic attacks throughout the afternoon and evening, and those closest to the stage were in serious physical danger. Far off, however, on the hills just above the crowd, it was pleasant. Those on the fringe found only music, not violence. It was dark by the time the Stones took the stage. Not long after that, Meredith Hunter was stabbed to death by an angel. Within moments, Altamont became the antithesis of Woodstock and the death of Aquarius. The Stones tried to calm the crowd, and the music continued for a while afterward, but the spirit had died. The revolution wasn't over. Nobody won anything. In fact, a lot of us felt like we'd lost big time. We tried to forget. The next Friday, after we ate chili at Walt's, we went Christmas shopping in Stockton. But the memories of Altamont continued to haunt us. In fact, until the Stones played Oakland in October, I steadfastly refused to attend outdoor concerts. I'd been too frightened by the crowds. But that last concert was too much to resist. Maybe it was recapturing a piece of youth, or a chance to wallow in nostalgia. I don't know. What I do know is that it was rock and roll and I liked it. Many thanks to Pat Craig and the Contra Costa Times for this 1994 first-hand account story. I was 16 when this concert took place, but I must admit that I don't remember hearing about it. Too busy working at my service station job, I guess, and I have never really been a big concert guy. Photos from dozens of sources across the internet, including Google, Wikipedia, the New York Times, Facebook groups, Reddit, SFGate, Getty, and the 68024 Corridor History Facebook group. Produced by Mark Harrigan. Thanks for watching.